Hi guys, it's Ross over at the Daily Jaws here with another exclusive interview for the 45th anniversary of Jaws 2. Today I'm joined by Gary Springer, aka Andy from Jaws 2. Gary, welcome to the Daily Jaws.
Hello, Ross. How are you? I'm glad to be part of the Daily Ross and one of your interviewees.
Well, it's great to have you here. And Gary, would you mind telling us where you are right now?
Well, right now I am on Martha's Vineyard, and I am staying at Deputy Hendrix's house for the week, Jeffrey Kramer. And as you can see, there's the harbor behind me with the ferry, the boats, all things that people who are familiar with Jaws might recognize.
And it's a beautiful day and we're all having a wonderful time. Gary, I'd love to dive in with the first question. We've got so much we want to know. And we've obviously interviewed some of your castmates as well. They've all said that you're a fantastic guest. So really looking forward to speaking with you. I think the first question is the obvious one. Can you believe it's been 45 years since Jaws 2 was released?
I can't. I mean, it's actually unbelievable. Um, what's even more unbelievable is that so many of us are still friends after 45 years. Usually you do a movie and you become best friends, and then the movie's over and then you'll see people and you'll hug and you'll kiss. But we've all stayed. I mean, as I said, I'm with Kramer. Gigi Vorgan lives down the street road from me, and I see her. Dukakis, Billy Van Zandt. We're all still very much involved. And that's 45 years later. So that means that there was an incredible bonding on this movie. And we really did. But it's like I've been through so many other things since then and before then, but there's really nothing like Jaws 2.
That echoes everything that all of the others have said so far in terms of the people we've interviewed. Everyone is just blown away by these amazing friendships that you made. And obviously, it was a very challenging shoot. There was obviously a lot of different things happening that wouldn't necessarily happen on a normal movie in terms of sort of things like changing of directors and vision and scripts and things like that. But before we dive into that, could you tell us a little bit about how you got the role of Andy?
It all goes back to when I was born. No. Uh, well, I grew up in the film industry and show business. My father was a press agent. He was one point he was the head of publicity for RKO Pictures, and then became a partner in another independent PR firm. And all those partners either went off to start producing or managing, and my dad kept the PR business with clients like Marilyn Monroe, who was my babysitter, Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, Warren Beatty, Myrna Loy, Betty Davis, Hank Fonda, Robert Preston. So I grew up doing this and never knew I was going to be an actor, never really had any, firm thoughts about it. But I did become an actor. I fell into it right out of high school. I made a movie called Law and Disorder with Carol O'Connor and Ernest Borgnine. And they sent me then I got an agent right out of that, did another movie called Dog Day Afternoon. It was a big movie. I went to Hollywood and I was actually cast after my first year. This is 1975 or 76 in the Hardy Boys TV series. And I was Chet Morton, their best friend. But, after the first few episodes, they realized that nobody wanted to watch the extra characters. All they wanted was Sean and Parker, So we were getting less and less. The scripts were getting less and less for all the other characters. It was really just becoming the two boys.
Mm.
And I was one day having lunch at the Universal Commissary, and I ran into a client of my father's named John Hancock. My dad represented Bang the Drum Slowly and Let's Scare Jessica to Death. He a few of John's movies. And we were talking and everything. He says, well, I'm doing this movie. There's a great role in it for you, but I know that you're doing the Hardy Boys. And I immediately called my agent and said, look, they don't want me on the Hardy Boys. They're just focusing on the boys. I'd love to get out of my contract and do Jaws 2. And that's basically how it happened, is that Universal owned both of them. They were both
Mm.
Universal projects. So I kind of got out of the Hardy Boys and segued right into Jaws 2, which was a dream.
We were all super grateful that you did, because
Yeah,
you're
me
fantastic in
too.
the film. You know, you really are. Had you seen the original Jaws before you did Jaws 2? I'm assuming you must have done.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I saw the original Jaws, I think, the first time I think I saw it in Times Square because
Oh, really?
I was still living in New York in 1975 in the summer of 75, and I was working on the film Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver was I was a production assistant on that. I had already acted in Law and Disorder and Dog Day, but I
Mm,
had decided that what I really wanted to do was be a crew guy because I love the camaraderie of the crew. And, in New York, where they're not huge, a lot of the crew goes from one movie to another movie and, they stay together. And so I wound up getting a job as a PA on Taxi Driver. But during that whole time of 75, yes, I definitely saw Jaws.
I was going to say, what did you think of the original
Oh,
movie?
I loved it. I was not, it never scared me off from the water. I will say that. I mean, I still went in the water. I might have had some trepidation and some thoughts about it, but I just thought it was one of the most exciting things that I had seen, in years because it was just so. It was a beautiful piece.
Mm. It really was. I mean, it's an incredible film. As you might have guessed, I think it's probably the greatest movie ever made. And people like Quentin Tarantino and a lot of people that have come through the movie industry, whether that's directors, writers, whoever, have been inspired by Jaws. But obviously, you're in a sequel. So, how does it feel, or when you were making Jaws 2, did you feel any particular pressure or anything around sort of being in the direct follow up to the most successful movie of all time?
Of course I did, and I think we all did. I mean, I wouldn't say it was an overhanging pressure that was always on us. Oh, we have to do this, we have to do that. But I think in the back of my mind, and I'm sure in the back of, most everybody else's mind, especially Jeannot and the producers and production people, it was
Mm,
definitely in the back of their minds. But the fact is what really topped that was the fact that we were able to add to the story. We were
mm.
building on that original brilliance with what we had and what we were doing. And that's what made it so exciting.
And what about because obviously Jaws 2 is one of those movies that had a sort of a change in terms of vision and script and director. What can you tell us about the original vision? Because obviously you said that you got the role of Andy on Jaws 2
Yeah.
through sort of John Hancock. What do you remember about sort of that original script and working experience? And what was the major changes, or how did the major changes impact you when obviously Jano and Carl came on board?
Well, the two of the best changes was from the first one to the second one was Andy was not as big of a dork as he was in the first one. Um, I had left California to drive my car across country. Some friends were going to stay in my house in LA because I figured I was going to be gone at least 6 months, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, so I left and started driving cross country. I was in Wisconsin and my agents called me up and said, "You've got to get back. They need you back tomorrow." And I said, "Well, there's no way I can get back tomorrow." "Why?" I said, "Makeup tests, makeup tests." So I drove straight through to New York, saw my mother, saw my girlfriend, saw my father and sisters, got on a plane, flew back to LA, and the next day went to Universal for makeup tests, where basically all they wanted to do was take a mold of my teeth because Andy wore braces. And
Ah,
and it was like, so they made me fake braces. And the makeup guy said, "Oh, we could have done this in Florida. Well, no worries. I just asked if you were around." But, so I had to, it made it a little more nuts. But yeah, so I had fake braces. And there is a picture of Tegan West, who was the original Mike, and I walking in Edgartown, and I've got this kind of camouflage Robin Hood hat with a big feather and the braces.
oh
And
wow.
he's a bit of a dork. However, Andy saved everybody because Andy didn't, was obvious that he wasn't going to get the girl.
Mhm.
It was, it was obvious that he was like, kind of like a little bit of the joke. But when the shark came, um, I'm the only one who kept a clear head. And all of a sudden, I was like, "Rope it up over there. Let's do it. Put it over there." Blah 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 blah. I also dived into the water to save the helicopter pilot. Because at one point, I jumped in the water to get the helicopter pilot. So Andy did a whole bunch of good things. And actually I think I had a bigger part than Roy, because Roy really didn't want to be there and didn't. So obviously when the change occurred,
Mm.
and I was very lucky because, out of most of our cast, I think only 4 or 5 maybe from the original cast of the kids stayed,
Mm.
and they let everybody else go. And I was one of them. John Dukakis, Keith Gordon, Ann Dusenberry, myself, um, Billy and David, um, Martha Swatek, but everybody else was pretty much new. Tom
Mm.
Dunlap was new, Gigi was new, Donna was new. Um, so it was a whole, it was really a scary time. And obviously when the script came back for the second one, Andy was one of the kids, as opposed to really being an obnoxious little dork and a little bigger part than Roy.
One of my favorite aspects of it, in terms of all of the relationships in Jaws 2, is your relationship with Sean. Because
Yeah.
when Michael is taken out of the picture, obviously he's knocked unconscious and taken back to shore, you almost become like a surrogate big brother. You take that role on very seriously, and the part where you're trying to get Sean off back onto your boat rather than sort of drifting away on Marge's boat. That moment, I was just like, wow, that's the kind of big brother that I would want.
A great moment, I mean, and it was a great character development, I mean,
Mm.
of because I was the best friend. In everything I did, I played the best friend very well, um, and I was the best friend, and it naturally, and especially when Andy all of a sudden, even though Andy, wasn't as strong, say, as maybe in the first script, if in this script, Andy still is the one who, does a lot of the mount that up over there, throw that up over there, let's get that
Mm.
line going over, over here. And and I definitely took Sean under my wing and protection as his pseudo big brother.
Was that aspect of the performance something that you was always in that new script, or was it something that you developed with Mark? How did that come about?
No, no, it just, I mean, obviously in the script there was, my yelling at Sean because I was also, his brother, but no, we didn't talk about it with Mark or anything and say, I'm going to take care of your brother or something like that. That never really happened.
You've mentioned obviously Roy Scheider, the returning star from the original Jaws. What was your experience of working with Roy?
Well, Roy was difficult then. He didn't really want to be there. Um, you know, Dreyfus got out of it. Lorraine was still there, obviously. Shaw was dead. But Roy didn't particularly want to be there. And even with the virtual new script, um, he kind of kept his distance from us. I mean, he was friendly. I actually became very good friends with Roy afterwards because, I lived in New York and he lived in New York, and I represented the Hamptons Film Festivals for years, and he was a big part of the Hamptons Film Festival. So we actually became quite friendly. But
Mm.
during the shoot, he was definitely more aloof and distant from all of us.
Mm.
And I mean, he pulled some, he would like delay. He would take off all of his wardrobe and sit on the back of the boat with a sun visor in between takes, and then they would have to, okay, we're ready, and he would have to get dressed again and get ready to, you know. Little things like that kind of got in the way. But basically,
Mm.
ultimately, I think Roy is wonderful in the movie. And as I said, as a guy, we really did bond well afterwards because of that experience,
Mm.
because of the experience that we're on. And we would always joke about it, he and I, about, all our time down in Navarre.
Well, it's good because we spoke to Billy Van Sant, who told us about a story that Keith Gordon, because obviously Keith Gordon worked on Jaws 2 with you guys, but he then also went on to work and play a younger version of Bob Fosse in All That Jazz, which Roy was incredible in. And they did talk about Jaws 2, Keith and Roy apparently, and Roy was quite he felt quite bad about not being as involved or connected with the younger cast, but he said it was just purely because of the experience and the circumstances of having to basically do Jaws 2 because it was a contractual obligation. But
Right.
it's great to hear, obviously, that you formed that really good friendship afterwards.
Yeah, no, and it was great because, I mean, even though while we were at it, it was like, "Oh, Roy." He was a good guy and, and everything went yeah.
And what about Lorraine Gary? What was it like working with her?
Oh, Lorraine was just so sweet. She was wonderful, and she still is, that I mean, we don't see her very much, but we did do a group reunion a few years ago, and Lorraine and Sid came, and it was wonderful to see both of them,
Mm,
but Lorraine was also while we were shooting, she was warm. I mean, she
yeah.
wasn't there all that often, but she was quite warm and friendly. We loved her.
Yeah, we spoke because we did last year. We did a Jaws: The Revenge interview with Lance Guest and Mitchell Anderson. So they played Michael and Sean Brody in the fourth movie, and they got both to work with Lorraine quite closely, and they both echoed exactly what you just said. It's just such a lovely, warm, kind,
Yeah.
giving person and actress, which is obviously great to hear because she's like royalty. She's the equivalent of the Queen, I guess, in the Jaws community. There is one other star that you got to work with, and it's a star that is in every Jaws movie, and there isn't much of a Jaws movie without it. The mechanical shark. What was it like working with the mechanical sharks on Jaws 2?
Actually, it was great fun. I mean, we didn't have that much interaction until towards the end of the film. Obviously, there were a couple of times when the shark, I mean, like there's one time when the shark first hits us and we flip the tornado, which is the catamaran that I was on, with Mike and Donna, and by that time Keith was on as well, and all of a sudden that idea of what was underneath us doing that was scary.
Mm,
The main interaction I had was at the end when um we're stranded just off of Cable Junction, and we're there, and then the shark bursts up through the tarp at the bottom of the boat, and we all go into the water. Well, the water was a little murky. There were tons of cables, but there was that eye and the teeth, and
mm.
close up in the water. That was scary. That that made you think, because no matter, even if you knew it wasn't real, you're in the water, you're swimming through all these cables between the boats and the sharks maneuvers, and there's this eye, and you can see the teeth, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, get out of that water quickly.
Which leads me nicely onto a story that we've heard about real sharks potentially
Oh,
circling one of the boats. But
yeah,
apparently, instead of getting the actors off the boat and making sure everybody was safe, brandy was sent out to the actors.
yep,
Now, what can you
absolutely.
tell us
We,
about the brandy? Because apparently,
we
you and Kramer were one of the culprits.
I love sailing. I would sail. I had never sailed in my life, but when we first started the movie back in May, I think, in Florida, we started off with, in a classroom with US Naval sailing instructor, and then we wound up going into the Intercoastal Waterway in Sunfish, and then we went right into the boats that we were sailing in the movie. And, as I said, I was on the Tornado, which is what the US Olympic team was racing on the time. And so it was fiberglass hulls, and we had to look like we've been sailing all our lives. So we had to be,
Mm.
and if you just touch those hulls, so, if you just raise the pier, it would shatter. They would say, okay, you should have done this when you could have done that, and you would have turned differently. And all right, bring in a new pontoon. Another reason movies cost so much. Um, but I sailed every opportunity I could get. Because I just loved it. And as Ray Loynd wrote in his Jaws 2 log, um, I was probably the best sailor of the group, he wrote. Uh, but yeah, we would sail, and because the tornado was very fast, but there would be times about a mile out, there was a little valley in the ocean, and it was just loaded with hammerhead sharks.
Mm.
So we would be sailing, and there would be a hammerhead between the two pontoons keeping pace with us. And it was like, yeah. And then later on, we'd either be jumping in the water or drinking cognac, brandy.
And I heard that you and Kramer were the two main culprits with the brandy. Is that true, or is that just a false rumor?
I get blamed for everything. You see, Andy gets blamed for everything, you know, because he was originally a dork. It's like, oh, must have been Andy's fault.
But then again,
I plead the fifth on that.
Brandy and Andy saved the day.
I plead the fifth on that.
Do you have any sort of favorite memories from the shoot at all?
I mean,
Hmm.
everything was my favorite memory. I mean, the memories are so. There's a picture I saw recently of me sitting in a director's chair on the boat that we were using, which was I think a 120-foot kind of trawler type thing that we were using for home base. And I'm
Hmm.
sitting there. David Brown is sitting next to me. The David Brown, one of the producers, and just reading the newspaper. And I'm just realizing, thinking that was great because here we are, we're working, we're running, but yet we're out on the ocean with people like David Brown and lounging. I mean, those memories stick in my mind.
Yeah.
Jeannot used to call in and we used to get bags of Apalachicola oysters, and we would just sit on the end of the boat opening oysters and eating oysters. Um, but no, I mean, again, all the sailing, but really the love that formed between all of us kids. We really all bonded together
Yeah.
closely. And so, and we were in all the scenes together. So it was like, we really were a group. And that movie for me anyway, because I really started in end of March with, the makeup test and getting cast. I didn't finish until February. So I
Mm.
was like, that was an 11-month, 10 or 11-month project for me, which was really wonderful because I was with great people making a sequel to one of the greatest movies of all time.
And who wouldn't want to do that? I mean, it sounds like an absolute dream, right?
Oh, it was. It was, and but again, I think that my favorite stuff was all the sailing and
Mm.
the playing and horsing around and the water balloons but it's really the camaraderie that developed between all us kids.
Yeah. And you mentioned Jeannot, and I know that Jeannot is still quite close with many of you. But obviously he wasn't super close with Roy. There were some issues there.
Heard rumors about hotel room battles and
We have heard things. Yeah, we're trying to get to the bottom of it. We've got an interview lined up with Jeannot a little bit later on today. But so we'll ask him about it directly. But what was your experience of the Roy Jeannot relationship? Was it really obvious? Was there massive problems publicly, or were they quite sort of
oh no, it
discreet
was
about
kind of
it?
obvious. I mean, again, that was one of the things, Roy, in between every shot, he would take off his shirts and he would have his sun thing on to sun himself. And that's just all to bust Jeannot's balls. And,
Yeah.
as well as everybody else, delaying tactics. And, I mean, the two of them, clashed. I actually saw Jeannot in France. He's retired now and lives in the Loire Valley. And my wife and I went and visited him about 2 years ago, and it was just wonderful seeing him because I hadn't seen him for a while because I
Mm.
don't live in LA and I live in New York, and he was in LA for so many years. But it was great to see him, and again, it was like a warmth and a bonding that you just hug.
I mean, it sounds. I think I already know the answer to this question, but what's the personal legacy of Jaws 2 for you?
Well, the personal legacy is, of course, the friendships that I've made. I mean, look
Mm.
where I am. I'm, on Martha's Vineyard with Deputy Hendricks, and it's the relationships, but also, I mean, the fact that no matter where I go, everybody knows Jaws too. And
Yeah.
it's from me. It's like I was at one reason I'm saying excuse me is because I've got hearing aids because I'm getting old. But I was at my hearing doctor the other day and we were doing a test, and afterwards we were talking. She said, well, and it's that time of year again. Family and I have been watching Jaws too. We had it on the other night. So, that's part of the legacy. It's like, And it's something I'm extremely proud of. Uh, you know, that my grandkids will be able to see it. I mean, they have watched it, even though they're too young to really notice. But there's Grampy up there. Um, and it's like, laying in bed at night and we're flipping through the TV and all of a sudden there I am. And it's like, it's a wonderful legacy. It really is.
It's so great to hear that, because we know that some people, when they're in certain movies or whatever, they don't disassociate, but they're not maybe super proud. But I think the fact that you're really proud of the work that you've done, the friendships that you've made, and ultimately the final film, I think, it speaks volumes. And I think that's the same across the board for everybody that we've spoken to.
Yeah.
What did you think of the final film when you first saw it?
I thought it was really tight. I thought it was, I was actually, I was pleased because I knew we did it.
Mm,
We didn't make something dorky or or lame that could not stand up
mm,
to the original. The original, of course, has got a special place in the pantheon of films, but I think we did pretty well. And critically, a lot of critics said it was a better film because it was a better made film. It was a better, so Jaws 2, and for a while I think it was the most successful sequel up to that point. Um, but yeah, no, I mean seeing the film, it just made me proud to be a part of it,
mm.
and yeah.
Yeah. And what do you think is the legacy of Jaws 2, now that we've had sort of 45 years to watch it and appreciate it and understand it? What do you think is the legacy?
See, I think it's gonna, it'll stand up there, and the legacy is people want to take one and two together. Three and four are a little different, I mean, they were again one and two, a lot of the same people, David Zanuck and Brown, and Verna Fields was the editor, and a lot of the crew. There was a lot of the similarities. Three and four were different, but I think that the legacy of Jaws 2 is that it will always be a brilliant complement to the original Jaws,
Mm.
and it will live, and its legacy will be on because of that. But yet it does stand on its own. People who never saw Jaws could still watch Jaws 2 and be completely, in awe of the whole thing, of the kids in the ocean and the shark and the scariness.
Yeah, totally. And interesting thing of I think it's about a month ago, we ran a Twitter poll and we asked our audience which is the worst Jaws movie. And Jaws 2 came last in that poll, which technically means the audience think it's the best. Which is great. But in terms of the obviously there was two other sequels after Jaws 2. There was Jaws 3D, which was directed by our good friend Joe Alves, and obviously Jaws the Revenge. What did you? They're obviously very different to Jaws and Jaws 2, but what did you think of those two movies?
Well, first of all, I love Joe Alves, but I thought that Jaws 3D was pretty much of a mess.
Oh,
Um,
right, okay.
you know, it was fun. It had some really good moments, but it isn't something that lasted with me. It isn't something that I said, "Oh, this is great," because it's a continuation of what I am. Because it was, it's a whole different venue, as opposed to the island,
Mm,
and it didn't work. And Jaws 4 was fun. It was basically fun to see Lorraine and Michael Caine.
yeah.
Um, again, there's no real, in my feeling, there's no connection between Jaws 1 and Jaws 2 and Jaws 3 and Jaws 4. They're two totally kind of separate entities. Um, you know, but they were both fun. I mean, the Wiki Wachi surfers and Dennis and Quaid and Lorraine and Michael. They were all fun aspects to them.
I think this is the thing. I think a lot of people sort of look at Jaws and Jaws 2 as maybe sort of, as you said, companions, and then Jaws 3 and Jaws the Revenge are just kind of, they're just different. They're not always seen as a sort of a legitimate canon.
Very much. That's pretty much exactly what I was just saying. Is that it's that they still are in the canon of the Jaws canon, but they're not the one and two, which were really together. It was like,
Mm.
Jaws 2 was definitely a continuation of Jaws to a point, especially because of Roy and Lorraine, while 3 and 4 were kind of different entities, but they had sharks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally agree. This is probably my favorite question, and I've asked all of the others this, and they've all come up with some great answers. Gary Springer, you are put in charge of the next Jaws movie. What's your 60-second Jaws movie pitch for 2023?
That's my pitch.
Yeah.
Well, there's a bunch of people in a retirement home on a nice little hill overlooking the bay, and they're sitting there in their wheelchairs and their rocking chairs on the porch.
Yeah.
What? What's that down there? Oh my God! It looks like it's back. Ah, what are we gonna do? And all of a sudden, you have these grannies and grandpas all, mounting up. We're gonna get that sucker.
Jaws, the retirement,
Jaws,
Revenge of Retirement. Jaws, the geriatrics. I don't even know what the title would be to that. Brilliant.
That's right. Geriatrics versus shark.
I think that's it. I think that's the one. I think that's it, Gary.
It'll make millions. It'll make millions.
Oh,
it'll bring the seniors back into theaters again.
God, it'll be like Cocoon, wouldn't it? That's what it would be. It'll be like Cocoon with a shark. I love it. Gary Springer, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us today on the 45th anniversary of Jaws 2. It's customary for me to leave the final word with the guests. So is there anything that you'd like to say before we say farewell and adieu to the viewers?
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Ross, for everything that you've done to keep the movie going and to keep the feeling and the life of the film, both films, all the films.
Thank you.
You really have done wonderful with that, and I congratulate you. Yes, as a final thing, it was something that if I didn't have it in my life, I would have never missed it. But having it in my life, I wouldn't know what to happen if I missed it, or if it was taken, that legacy was taken away from me now, because 45 years have been great, because life revolves, people revolve around Jaws. Everybody knows Jaws 2. You talk about it, and as I said, my hearing doctor was talking about it the other day, but it's been such a part of our lives, and it's been such a part of my personal life as well as my professional life, that I was honored and privileged to be a part of that movie.
That's perfect. Gary, thank you so much for joining us on the Daily Jaws on what is the 45th anniversary of Jaws 2. Guys, I've been Ross for the Daily Jaws, and what an emotional end to an incredible interview. I'll drink to your legs, and farewell and adieu.
Thank you, sir. Farewell and adieu.
If you love Jaws, sharks, and shark movies, then please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and also visit our website, thedailyjaws.com, for all the latest Jaws news and stories.